Okay. Right. So if you have a look in the list of assignments section, you'll notice there is a new milestone for the project over here. Project milestone 2. So yes, milestone 1 was due today. I see 17 of 21 students submitted, so that's great. That means 17 of you have your topics. Super excited to check this out and see what you all chose to do. If you still didn't submit your topic, please do so ASAP, as soon as possible. If you don't have an idea for your topic, then let's talk. Okay, during the lab time, let's talk, let's brainstorm, and let's come up with something that you can do. So if that's the reason why you're not submitting, please get in touch with me so we can figure out a topic for you. And milestone 2 is the research. So I did a little update of the timetable. I think it would be good to give you 2 weeks to work on the next step of research. So instead of due at the beginning of week 9, I'm changing it to be due at the beginning of week 10. So this is the milestone after you've chosen your topic, where you can do a little bit of research and really choose who you want to interview. And not only that, but you'll prepare your list of questions to ask in the interview. Okay, so this week I'll introduce the milestone and let you do your research. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about how to conduct an interview. So that should be fun. So next week, there'll be a little bit less on the HTML, I think, and more on the project. Are you done the research already, Antonio? Checking it out? So, yes, let's have a look. You have the instructions here. So if you go to the assignment section, you could download these PDF instructions. So you've chosen your topic and you've done a quick mention of what it is already in milestone 1. I want you to define it a little bit better. So you can use Wikipedia or Google or anything to help you define your topic. So I pretty much opened up the door for you to choose any topic. The only requirement is that you're able to define it. So as long as you could explain clearly what your topic is, and it's going to be the driving force behind what you research and your interview, who you choose to interview and what you choose to ask them should all be related to this definition. So I'm not asking for much, just a 1 or 2 paragraph description and in your own words. So this is very important. Do not copy and paste. Okay, that is plagiarism. I want you to show that you're understanding the stuff that you're reading. So you do that by writing in your own words, okay, not by copying and pasting. If you can, try to find some statistics. Maybe you could think of some statistics that will make your topic more, relevant or more, display some kind of importance to it. So part 1 is just a quick definition, and part 2 is about doing some research. So I want you to find 3 sources of information. 2 of them could be YouTube videos. I know everyone loves watching videos, so YouTube has so many videos on there that should relate to your topic in some way. So try to find some kind of how-to video, some kind of explainer video, or really anything that's relevant to your topic. Okay, something that should help you understand more about what your topic is or what different areas your topic touches on. And you should find one website, one web-based article. So it could be a website, it could be a scholarly article, it could be a blog post, anything online. Okay, and for each one of these examples, so you'll have 3 in total, right? 3 in total. Want you to write about this stuff. So obviously include a title and link to the source, but then I want you to put a quick summary, just one paragraph, and then your opinion, another paragraph, 1 or 2 paragraphs. Okay, so it's really not much writing I'm asking for. From each source you find, to summarize in 1 paragraph is very, very short. Giving your opinion, your reflection is 1 paragraph is very, very short. Just try to do quality over quantity, I think. Okay, so what did you learn? What did you like about the subject matter? What did you dislike about the subject matter? You don't have to answer all of these questions. These questions are there to stimulate your thinking and to get you just to write. That's essentially what I want you to do. Write from yourself. I don't want you just to answer these questions robotically. Okay, we're not robots. Okay, I want you to kind of speak from your own perspective as much as possible. What did you like? What didn't you like? What ideas stood out to you? And so on. Any questions about that? So 3 times you'll have a summary and a reflection/opinion. The research, got a question in the chat. Should the research be due during the spring break or after? I don't include holidays. I go by week. So week 10 means at the beginning of class on week 10. So if you're curious about the holidays, that gives you a lot of time. Where is it? Here we go. Woohoo, holidays, forgot about that. So next week we have 1 more class. The week after there is no class, meaning this will be due on the 8th of April. Whew. Tons of time. You're going to be experts in the subject with all the research that you have time to do. So why am I asking you to research if you're going to do an interview, and you're going to ask somebody these questions? Well, how do you know what to interview them about? Okay? You might have some idea about your topic, but the best way to prepare for an interview is to research. That way, first of all, you know what questions to ask, but when you're conducting the interview, you'll have more knowledge to be able to interact with the person a lot better. You'll be able to give rebuttals to their answers. You'll be able to ask new questions based on their responses, and you'll be able to steer the conversation in a direction that might be more interesting. If you just go in there without any deeper knowledge or any preparation, who knows where the interview is going to go? And you might effectively lose that opportunity to get something really good out of it. So the more you can research and prepare before you do this interview in the next step, the better off the next step will be. Okay, so we're not going to talk about preparing the interview yet. We'll talk about that next week, next class. And I'll talk a bit more about how to conduct a good interview. All right. Questions, comments? Okay, so on the agenda, let's get back to the technical stuff. Oh yeah, you could continue the document that you've used for milestone 1. So you can just keep adding your writing into that document, and when it's done at the due date, you'll just submit it again to Leah. Okay, so back to HTML. We're going to start working with layouts. I have 2 weeks planned for this. So you'll see we are here, part 1 of layout. We're going to learn about this thing called the box model. We're going to be playing with HTML boxes today. We're going to learn some shorthand notation for CSS, so we can learn to write less lines of code. We're going to use a way of writing our code that condenses it and makes it less. And then we're going to learn more about specific containers that we could use to create our layout. Do you want to go over the test before we get into the new step? Is anybody curious about the solution to the test?
Sure.
Sorry?
I said sure.
Yeah. All right, so let's do a quickie of that. Can you pause for a second? Okay, so that's all I want to say about the test. Were there any specific questions about the test? Okay. Okay, so my plan for the new material is to go through it rather quickly because I believe coding is the best way to learn. So I'm going to go through the textbook chapters. You have the textbook chapters in Omnivox. Where is my Omnivox? There we go. So if you head on over to the list of documents, below where I'm putting the lecture recordings, you'll have the recording of this week available soon. But in the textbook area, that's where I'm posting all the chapters from my textbook, from my notes. So there is a new one. I just have to refresh the page. There's a new one here for week 8, and there's 3 chapters in it. So we're going to touch on most of the stuff in these chapters today, but we'll finish chapter 9 next week, I think. So I highly recommend these PDF files. They have not only the expectations of my course, but I think a pretty simplified and straightforward way of explaining the material. So let's look at that. CSS shorthand. I'm going to jump to the box model, so chapter 8. Okay, so yay, containers. Why yay? Because we're finally starting to work with layout. Layout, I mean positioning the elements in our page. Up until now, we've just created our tags. We maybe changed their size and their color, things like that, but we didn't really affect their placement in the page, their position in the web page. So to do that, we're going to start learning about this thing called the box model. The basic idea is, if we want to create our layout, we're going to put the items into a box, and then we style the box. So by taking all the content of our website, it could be headings, paragraphs, images, whatever, and putting it inside a box, we can then position that box in the page using things like padding, borders, and margins. So that's what this box model is. It's the definition of how layouts work inside HTML. So there are 4 elements to the box model, which I'm showing right here. There's obviously the content. So what is the content? Whatever your tag is, it's whatever's in between the tags, text content. Usually it's text content, right? So this is a standard tag and it has text content. That's what we're talking about inside the box model of the content. But you also have empty tags, which we didn't see yet, like the image tag. We're going to use the image tag, which is also an element inside our website that we can apply the box model to. And it doesn't have any content per se inside the tag, but it does have the image content, which we will see sometime soon. But it's not only these tags, it's every single tag, even the BR tag or the HR tag. These were the empty tags, the line break and the horizontal line. Even these follow the box model. So what I'm saying about the box model here can apply to every single HTML tag in your website. So that was the content, and there's not really much you can do to change the layout of this content except style it with our CSS properties. So you could change the font size, you could change the color, you can change certain things about it. But if you really want to get into the layouts, you have to start looking at these other properties. We have the border, we have the padding, and we have the margin. I like explaining it in this order because it's very helpful to remember. The border, pretty simple to understand. We've seen a border before, probably in a spreadsheet, on an image online, who knows. It's just a line surrounding the content. So in the box model, you see this blue line over here. That's talking about the border, right? This area in blue over here. So that is one element that we have to style, that we are able to style inside the box model. It's the border. And then you have stuff inside and outside of the border that you can style to create a layout. You have the padding, which is inside the border, and then you have the margin, which is outside the border. So you might wonder, why do we have two different things to create space between our elements or between our boxes? You'll see how it becomes useful. Margin is the space outside of the border that separates different elements with empty space. But the padding is area inside the border that could give some more breathing room inside the box of whatever element you're looking at. So we're going to look at some practical examples, so don't worry. I'm going to show you clear examples of how this works. For now, just understand this theoretical idea of the box model. HTML and CSS, to create our layouts, we start working with these four elements of the box model. We can play with any different thing that relates to the content, the border, and the space inside and outside the element called the padding and the margin. We're going to learn how to use the CSS properties to change the values of the padding and the margin and the content and so on. And keep in mind that it can apply to any single tag. So whatever we're learning here will apply to any single tag. But to create our layouts, we're going to start using container tags. HTML containers. Up until now, we've used tags that really create specific elements in the page, right? So we've created headings, right? We've created paragraphs, right? Lots of paragraphs. What else have we done? We've created our lists, right? With our list items. Item. Right, so these are tags that create actual elements in the page that are very closely related to the content itself. So if we're making a recipe web page, we're going to put content in there related to the recipe. Container elements are more like boxes to put those elements in. So this week, we're only going to look at one HTML tag. That's a container, and it's called the div tag. Div, because it stands for division, and it traditionally has been used to create a division in your page. So here I'm showing the example of taking the div tag and putting our HTML elements inside it. So the way of working with these div containers is we put other tags inside them. So in my example over here, what I'm going to do is come up to the top. So the first tag inside my body, before all the other tags, I will open up the div tag. I'll take that closing tag away that brackets put automatically. So here I have the opening div tag. I'm going to take all of these tags and indent them because I'm showing the parent-child relationships. Because these tags are now inside the div, I just wanted to indent them one to the right. And then at the end of all these tags, I'm going to come back here and put the closing div tag. So I hope you see now the importance of indenting. We could very clearly see that this div tag is perfectly aligned with its closing div tag. And then we could very neatly see all the elements inside at the next level. So let's have a look at what this does. I'm going to open up my live preview here. And what do we get? There we go. As one would expect, we have the heading, the 3 paragraphs, and the 4 list items. And we don't actually see the div. And that's normal. The div tag, think of it like an empty, invisible box on its own. You actually need to put the elements inside and start styling the div tag in order to make it visible. So let's do that now. Okay, so now we're going to start seeing those CSS properties that you could use to create your layouts on the div tag. So on the next page, you have the most common properties when working with containers. And we're going to show you an example of each one right now. So you can see in the example up here, we have the div tag from the example before with 2 elements inside. And the CSS is shown here on the right where I'm selecting the div tag and applying CSS styles to the div tag. So the div tag is that box. I'm applying styles to the box that all the other elements are in. So let's do that. I'm going to come over here to look at these examples. Padding, border padding, margin, background color, width. So a lot of stuff that we could do on the box to style it. Just going to make the page a bit smaller so we can see everything. All right. So let's go at it. So put our CSS up here, right? I'm going to repeat it over and over and over so we remember. CSS style tag belongs in the head of the page. Descriptive stuff that belongs in the head. And I'll create some space in order to have space to put my CSS styles. So I said we wanted to style this div. The div container is invisible. We can't see it yet. So let's do some stuff to make it visible. I'll put the div tag selector. See, the syntax is exactly the same. The name of the tag, which is div, DIV, and then the squigglies. So like I was saying when I was reviewing the test, always the same rules of syntax will apply everywhere in our code. Let me do some stuff just to make more visible on the page. Give me 1 second. Okay, just want to be able to see all the code at the same time. So I now have this div selector up here, which is selecting the div tag in the body of our page. And the first thing I want to style is over here called the border. There are a few things to style when you start working with border. You can see border in the code assist has lots of different things that you can style. I'm going to keep it simple and show you the 3 most essential. There's the border style. And in my class, the only style we're going to use is solid. So border style solid, and you can already see what's happening. The border suddenly became visible. And the style of border we selected was a solid, which just means a straight line. There are others like dashed. You see, this is a dashed border with all these lines. There's dotted, there's others, but I really don't want to go over them because we only really use solid in this class. And then there are 2 others that are useful. The border thickness. the border width, which refers to the thickness of the border. Okay, so right now the default is 1px, and that's why even though I put 1px, it didn't change. If you want to see it change, I'm going to put 10px. Kaboom, huge border, right? Avoid this. We're going to talk about graphic design in the future. If you want to put a border, usually a thin border is the way to go. I just want to show you this other CSS property for working with borders. And the last one, what if you want to change the color of the border? This one is quite useful. Border-color, and then you can put a different color. Eesh, that's hurting my eyes. I'm going to change that. Usually I end up doing something like a light gray just to make it very faint. Okay. So now that we've styled the border of the div tag, it's become visible. We can see that this div tag, where we put all those tags inside, is actually the container holding all of them. So isn't that smart? You know, if you want to create a layout with the tags in your page, just put them in a box, and then you can style the box into the layout that you want. So now that we've made it visible, it'll be a lot easier for us to start seeing the other things. Let's jump over here to background color. Okay, so let's give our box, the div tag, a background color. I'm going to come inside the selector for the div and give it a background color. How about azure? That sounds good to me. Sounds fancy. Azure. I don't even know what that means. So background color, let's see the output. And you can now see that the box has a beautiful background color. Isn't she lovely? Can make it even better by working with padding and margin. Okay, so we looked at border, we looked at background color. Now let's have a look at padding and margin. So remember from the box model, padding is the space inside the border. And right now you can see that there is no padding. You see how close the text is to the left edge over here? That's because the default padding is 0 pixels. There's no padding. So if you want to add padding, you can simply put the CSS property called padding and put a value, a number of pixels that you want. So let me put 20 pixels of padding. Did you see a jump? Watch it jump. I'm going to remove it and I'll put it back. You see? We now have 20px pixels of padding on all 4 sides of the container. There's padding on the left, padding on the top, even though it's a little bit harder to see, but there's padding on all 4 sides of the box. What this is actually doing, which we're going to learn about soon in the shorthand lesson, is it's actually specifying 4 different paddings. It's specifying the padding on the left side as 20 pixels, and it's also doing it on the right, on the top, and on the bottom. So we're going to learn about shorthand in a moment, just as a little sneak peek, but you can see that I've replaced all 4 of these lines of code to specify padding on the individual sides of the box with 1 line of code, which specifies on all 4 sides of the box at the same time. And finally, let's look at that margin thing. So it's very, very similar to padding, except the space we add will be on the outside of the box. So right now we do see some space. That's not because the div has any margin, it's actually the body tag. So the body tag itself already has some margin to it. I'm pretty sure that's the body tag. So what I'm going to do, remember the body tag is the parent tag of all the tags in your page. and for some reason, they put a margin on it by default. So let me just double check and remove it. Yeah. So by putting a margin of 0 on the body, I've removed that default margin. Don't worry about that. The reason I did it is because I wanted you to see more clearly the padding, the margin on the div that we're about to apply. So let's go back to the div over here and add the margin. And I'm going to put 10px. And you can see now there's 10 pixels of space on the outside of the box. It's specifying the margin on the left, on the top, on the right, and on the bottom. There aren't any tags here below on the bottom, so we can't see it. But if there were, you would see that there was 10 pixels of space between the box, the div, and the other tags. Okay, so this value, you can put whatever you want. Increase it to 20, you'll see more space. If I put it to 200, you'll see huge margin, right? So big that the text can't even fit in the box anymore. Any questions so far? We went through, quick review, we went through adding a div tag, which is a container for all the other tags that we want to style when we want to create our layout. So we've added that div container tag and put the tags we want inside them. And then in the CSS, we've selected that div tag and we started playing with the properties of the box model. We've added a border, we've added a background color, we've added some padding inside the border, and we've added some margin outside of the border. Of course, you'll get to practice all of this through my exercises. Now let's start talking about width. So see there are no questions. Good, that means it's clear. It means you can't wait to code it. So I'm going to move on. So now let's talk about width. The next elements coming up are working with the size of the container. But first, let's see how it's behaving by default. You notice when I made the browser window bigger, what happened to the box? So we're now starting to learn more about the box model, about how CSS elements are laid out in the page. So this is actually a lot cooler than you might think. You might not realize how important this feature is, that the box is resizing itself depending on the size of the window. It's the reason you have all those fun things on your phone, on your tablets, on your computer screens, because the internet was designed to be responsive. It was designed to fit and be displayed properly on any different sized screen. So whether it's your phone, your tablet, or your computer screen, there's things built into the CSS language that make it responsive to different screen sizes. So we're seeing our first thing right here, which is responsive, and it's the width of the block element, the container element. Right now, what is happening is the width is specified as 100%. So when something is specified in a percentage, it's going to expand or shrink relative to the size of the page or relative to the size of the parent element. So because it's 100% width, it's going to take up 100% of the space available to it. But look what happens if we change this. Imagine we put 50%. See what happens? It is now taking up less space. So I can now shrink the page, and it's going to continue to take up only about 50% of that page. Great. So we're starting to get into how to create a website layout. We can put our things inside a box, and then we could resize that box in order to position it in our page. Any questions about that? So there's two different ways to specify the width, and that's what I'm showing you here in the textbook. One is using a percentage, like I just showed you, and another is using a pixel value. These are two different ways of specifying widths. What I just showed you in percentage is a relative width, but you can also use a fixed width. So this is kind of important. It's on the theory side. So if you can understand the theoretical side of this, when it comes time to code it, it'll be smooth sailing. So let me change the width from 50% to a fixed width of pixels. I'm going to say 200 px. Now if I head on over to the live demo, I could resize the browser window as much as I want, but the size of the box doesn't change. So is that clear? Using a fixed unit of pixels, it means that this box will always be that amount of pixels. You could resize the browser window, it's not going to change its fixed width. But if you use a width of percent, so if I change this to maybe 50%, that is a relative width, and it's always going to resize itself to be a percentage of the page. Okay, so these are what we'll be working with in the exercise coming up. There's just two little pieces of the puzzle I want to explain first. And that is how to center something. And then we'll also talk about these two last properties, the minimum width and the maximum width. So how to center something. Instead of giving you a long explanation, I'm just going to be honest and say this is a weird one. Margin, 0 space auto. Okay, for now, this is the one line of code you need to center a box horizontally in the page. So you see, now the box is in the middle, and it is going to keep itself centered all the time. So this is something you might want to just jot down on a little sticky note next to your computer while you work. Soon I will explain what this means and why this works, but for now I just want you to just use it. Margin, we're playing with the margins outside the box, and we're specifying something here that tells it to stay centered in the page. Cool. So we're starting to learn what we need to create a more official, real-looking website. And the last thing I want to talk about before we take a little break is this max width. I think we'll ignore minimum width for now. Let's talk about maximum width. So how about instead of width, I specify something like a fixed unit, so 200 pixels. So that will keep the box fixed at 200 pixels. And I'm actually going to remove the centering. It's easier to see what I'm about to show if it's not centered in the page. So fixed width of 200 pixels, the box stays the size it needs. Now, instead of a fixed width, I'm going to change it to say a max width, a maximum width. Can you think about what that is? Think about it with, natural English. We're telling this box to have a maximum width of 200. So that means no matter how much we resize our page, it will only get bigger and bigger until a maximum of 200 pixels. So if I take my screen and make it smaller, when it's less than 200 pixels, it starts to shrink. But if I make it larger, 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 eventually it will reach that maximum of 200, oh, right there, and it will stop growing. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. The world of the relative width, where it resizes itself, and the best of the fixed width, where when you're trying to do graphic design on a website and you want to create a layout that is somewhat controllable, you have this maximum width, which behaves like a fixed width. So this is the best of the both worlds, and you will create a very simple layout using both the fixed width and this maximum width layout in the exercises that are coming. So I suggest we take a little break, and then we'll actually start getting our hands dirty with code, doing the exercises, and creating our layout. And at that time, I'll also talk about the shorthand stuff. Okay. So let's take a good break. Let's take 15 minutes. I want you to get up, walk around, go run outside for a minute, get some fresh air, eat a snack, take a 10-minute nap, do whatever you need. So I'll see you at 2:15 for the lab time, and we're going to actually start coding with this stuff. Okay?
See you then, sir.
Yes. So the thing about 5A is it's not really a real application. It's really just so you learn what the box model is. And so you learn the different styles that you can apply to it. So let's download the exercise file, 5A. I'm going to open it with brackets. Let's see what this one looks like. Okay, so you'll see that this page has just a bunch of tags set up. It doesn't really matter what they are. Okay, the point is that we have pretty much all the tags that we've used up until now. There's an H1 tag, there's a P tag, there's a list tag, and there's even images. We haven't seen images yet, but they're still in there. Okay, so I don't expect you to understand how to use the image tag or anything about it. I just want you to see that we could play with the box model of even the image tag. So what I'm asking you to do in this exercise is to go in and create some CSS. To create a CSS style sheet, so create an internal style sheet. Then we're going to use a tag selector to style the H1 tag. You'll style these things of the H1 tag, and then you can repeat the process for all the other tags. So I want you to visibly see the results of what you're coding. So I'm going to come into the CSS over here, into the head of the page, and add my CSS style tag. And let's get the preview open. I'm going to select that first H1 tag with an H1 selector. And then one by one, I'm just going to start adding these styles. So the border, background color, padding, and margin. Basically exactly what I did when I was explaining the textbook. So let's start with the border. Border style, solid. Border width. I'm going to put 5 pixels. I'm not sure why it's not previewing. Let me just try that again. Okay. It wanted me to save the page. There we go. So my preview doesn't always work. Sometimes I have to save the file for it to update. And so on. Okay, so put the border style, the border width, the border color. And please continue to add these tags. I really want you from this exercise just to see it working. You'll do it to the H1 tag, and then you'll do it for the other tags in the page. They're listed here. Paragraph, unordered list, list item. Start to look at the tags in the preview as you add your styles, so you start to see the boxes for each one of the tags. Right, so I'm going to stop talking for, I don't know, 15 minutes, give you some time to work on that. And then I will work on the shorthand with you together, so we can learn about that after. Okay. So exercise 5B, I'm going to teach what I was talking about before, the shorthand notation. So to do that, I suggest you download the exercise file, and you can do it with me. Okay. So is everyone ready? So with exercise 5A, it was practice creating the style sheet, practice creating selectors, and applying some styles. And we learned styles that apply to containers. We learned about the border style, the padding style, and the margin style, along with the background color. But there's one exercise which focuses specifically on shorthand, because these three styles, the border, the padding, and the margin, they all have two different ways that you can specify their values. One is shorthand, meaning it's shorter, and I don't know what the word is, but probably like a longhand because it's longer. The normal way is the longer way. But I want to show you the shorthand notation so you understand. It's super helpful to understand, and it also allows you to write code that is more efficient. Less lines of code, and we all like that. So I'm going up to chapter 7. And first I'll explain in theory the different kinds of shorthands. And then the exercise, there's actually no code. There's no HTML code, you'll notice. So it's not like a real page. See, the body is empty. It's just something that I set up for you to practice writing shorthand notation. So it's kind of like a little worksheet. You know, when you were learning a language, they made you write, I don't know, your alphabet over and over. So this is kind of like these little exercises to practice. So first, padding and margin. Padding and margin is the exact same thing. The only difference is wherever it says padding, for padding, we replace it with margin for margin. But the shorthand notation is all the same. So what we've done now in the last exercise was we used this one, padding and then the value. So you might not have realized, but it's actually a shorthand notation, because what this padding is actually doing is specifying the padding on all four sides. The top, the right, the bottom, and the left. They all got 25 pixels. So the alternative of that is to specify the padding on all four sides. That's what you see up here. So in this section, I'm showing one example of using the not shorthand padding, and this is the shorthand. So you can specify all four sides individually like this: padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. So if you want to get really precise and control the padding separately on each side, you can use that. But generally, using this one is faster and easier because one line of code and we're specifying the padding on all sides. So is that clear? When we did in the other exercise, we did padding and we put 20 px. What that is really doing, it's a shorthand notation for, I'm just going to copy and paste so it goes faster. For that. So what we actually did was with one line of code, we did the same thing as doing these 4 lines over here. So it's obviously faster. If you had the choice to write 1 line of code or 4 lines of code, which one would you choose? I would suggest the 1 line. So that's the simplest form of shorthand. It's pretty easy to understand. But keep in mind, there are a few different ways of using this shorthand. So I'm highlighting in the textbook another way. What you see in these brackets are values. So you could put 1 value here to specify the top and bottom, and 1 value here to specify the left and right. So it gets a bit more complicated. Please don't stress out about it. But when you start coding websites and you're making layouts, you might find it useful, and it's quite common where you want to specify a left and right padding, that's 1 value, and a different value for the top and bottom. So we have that option in CSS to use a shorthand notation, putting 2 values. And as long as they're put in the correct order, the first number specifies the top and bottom, the second number specifies the left and right. So for example, this padding over here, 2550. So I'll retype it over here, 25px and 50px. So let's fix that over here in the longhand notation. So if I said the first number is what? It's the top and bottom. So 25 pixels would go to the top and bottom. Top and bottom. And then the second number goes to the left and right. So 50px. So again, now it's getting personal preference. Do you find it's easier to use 1 line of code to do it? Or do you find it's easier to use the 4 lines of code? The last type of shorthand I want to show you is this one here. It's also 1 line of code, and you would use it to specify all the different sides at the same time. So this one here, padding 25, 50, 25, 50, is actually saying first is the top value, then it's the right, then it's the bottom, and then it's the left. You're probably wondering why is it in this order? I don't know, but the way to remember it is like a clock. You start at the top, and then you move clockwise around. So the first one is the top, second one is the right, third one is the bottom, and the fourth one is the left. Okay, so clockwise from the top. So if I were to take that example from the textbook, this is the shorthand version. So what would this first number be? You start at the top. So padding dash top would be 25. The second value, the 50 over here, we start at the top and we go clockwise. So this would be padding right, and that's 50px. Third number, 25, starting at the top, going clockwise, we're now at the padding bottom. So 25px. And finally, the last one, at the top, clockwise, we end up at padding left. 50px. So again, personal preference, 1 line of code versus 4 lines of code. I leave it up to you. So these are the more complicated versions of padding. There's even another one I didn't go over. It's crossed out in the textbook because it gets pretty advanced, but you might see this at some point in the future, so it's useful to know. I don't expect everyone to memorize this instantly, but you have the textbook to look it up. And the more you use it, the more familiar it will become. So usually in my class, the 2 shorthands we end up using are this one, where everything's written in one value, giving you the same values on all 4 sides. Or sometimes we use the 2 value one, where it's like the top, bottom, and the left and right value. Okay, so there will be that worksheet and the exercise to practice converting to and from. And for margin, it's the exact same thing, except instead of the word padding, you'd have the word margin. Padding and margin shorthand are exactly the same. Okay, so we'll practice in the exercise. And the last shorthand, which is a lot simpler, is the border shorthand. So in the exercise before, I made you use 3 lines of code to specify the border. But there is also a shorthand for the border. And it's very, very simple. Instead of 3 separate lines, all you have to do is say border. And then you could put those values all together in this one line in any order. It doesn't matter the order. So to copy this value, to copy this non-shorthand, I'll just retype the value. So solid, put a space, 1px, put a space, and black. So this one line of code here is equivalent to these 3 lines of code over here. So it's obviously a lot faster and simpler, I find, to do it this way, but it's helpful to remember what the 3 different values are doing if you do it the long way like this. What's a little trickier is going in the reverse. So if I gave you this one line of code for border, can you expand it to be those 3 lines of code? So you need to remember what the 3 things are, right? So we remember that we have a border style. Remember that we have a border width. And we have a border, oops, a border color. So going in the reverse is a little trickier, but then you can start, mixing and matching. So obviously black will be the color. So let's put black over here. And that leaves just the style and the width to figure out which one goes where. Okay, so I will let you work on that. This is the shorthand notation, and it's a little tricky, but I wanted to expose you to that because you'll see it in the code in the future. Sometimes you'll see the margin specified in shorthand, sometimes you'll see it in longhand. So I really wanted to make sure you've seen this before. And also, I think it helps you write better code. So it allows you to learn a little bit more about writing some better code. Any questions about that? Okay, so for this week, I'm not sure if I'll have time to lecture again. Keep in mind we have 2 weeks for this layout stuff. So what I was expecting for today was 5A, B, C, and D. Okay, so 5E, we're not going to do today. Okay, and try your best for C and D, but keep in mind if we don't finish it today, I will be using next week to go over it. Because 5C and D are the ones where we make a real website. I give you the HTML code with some real content, and you're going to quickly create a layout for it. So all the stuff we've been learning this week will apply in C and D to create a real looking website. So hopefully you enjoy that. There's about half an hour left in the class, so I don't think we'll get through all of it, but try working on it for homework, and I will go over the solution for them next week. All right, so I'm going to create those breakout rooms, and I would finish 5B right now for sure while I'm here in case you have questions, and I leave it to you to work on 5C and D on your own. Sound good? All right, got a thumbs up. So thanks for your attention.